My Lords, I begin by noting the level of engagement in your Lordship's House with the bill, both in its number and the weight of years of experience. I was tempted to ask the library to make a calculation of the total, but then I decided that was not a good use of public funds because the level of concern about the bill is very obvious. And that was reflected in the opening speeches in this debate from the front benches. I agree with almost every word from the noble Baroness Lady Chapman of Darlington. She very clearly identified that the bill will not solve the problems it purports to address, that it breaks international law, as many noble and often learned lords have said since then in this debate, and it gives unprecedented powers to ministers at a time when here in your Lordship's House we have already seen a great many bills going through. That's just in my 3 years here, many of which it was already being said, these give unprecedented powers to the executive, and those bills are largely now law. We have an overweening executive, unprecedented in history. And what an executive. The speech of the noble Lord Purvis of Tweed was notable, I thought, in bringing out the second point in that list, the breaking of international law. It didn't so much bulldoze the government's arguments for just cause for its actions as grind them into tiny fragments, so they'd lay on your Lordship's House like a layer of sand. And as the noble Lord Ricketts outlined, this is happening at a critical point in this age of shocks. The geopolitical shocks that he was highlighting, but I'd also add the broader climatic and environmental shocks. The UK remains the chair of the COP climate talks. Many are hoping, perhaps against hope, that we might play a significant positive role in the COP15 biodiversity talks, finally soon to start. And destruction of the legal principles that the UK played historically a big part in creating can only damage not just our place in those talks, but the entire progress of those crucial endeavours. Now, I said that I agreed with almost everything the noble Baroness Lady Chapman said. Where I would differ with her is her stress on the reason for not voting today. That magical incantation, but we're the unelected House. Well, your Lordship's House has already had cause to ponder that lack of election does not mean lack of responsibility. That a significant number of the matters increasingly coming before us could best be labelled in the purest sense a conscience vote, and perhaps look back to what happened with the Internal Markets Bill, when with the leadership of the noble and learned Lord Judge, this House took a firm stand. Now, many of the practical arguments against this bill have already been powerfully made, but in part I chose to devote a considerable chunk of my week to this debate because I wanted to demonstrate the wide breadth of concern across this House. Many of the speakers with whom I'm agreeing in opposing this bill are not people with whom I have broad general agreement across a wide range of issues, but the broad view of the House is very obvious with me agreeing with them. But I also consulted with the Green Party of Northern Ireland because I think it is important, crucial indeed, that all of the communities of Northern Ireland are represented here in your Lordship's House. And like so many others, they stress that this bill amounts to a near-complete unilateral rewrite of what's supposed to be an internationally binding treaty. Article 4 of the Withdrawal Treaty explicitly prohibits this type of legislation. But more, it's clear that the scale of the provisions in the bill are not necessary and risk making the problem worse. Very directly, what is proposed will create further difficulties for Northern Ireland businesses. The only businesses who will benefit will be GB firms who ship to Northern Ireland. And I think the noble lady Baroness Ritchie of Downpatrick made this point very clear. The only sensible solution to the clear problems with the current arrangements, which, let's not forget, since the Minister referred in his introduction to the democratic deficit, are subject to a consent vote in the Assembly in 2024, is managed through negotiation and mutual agreement. And I'd note that that is been very strongly stated by the Northern Ireland Business Brexit Working Group, who represents, among others, the Dairy Council, the Federation of Small Businesses, Hospitality Ulster, the Institute of Directors, CBI NI, Logistics UK, Manufacturing NI, the NI Grade Trade Association, NI Meat Exporters Association, NI Food and Drink Association, NI Chamber of Commerce and NI Retail Consortium. We need negotiation and a negotiated settlement, not this bill.